Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the Afternoon Beat. My name is Saad Jadwid and I'll be keeping you company this afternoon as we discuss one of the biggest stories this week. We're diving right into South Africa's budget saga, a story that's got everyone talking. Just this week, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana rolled out a revised budget plan, scaling back a controversial VAT hike from 2 points to a gradual 1% increase over 2 years. It's meant to rake in a few billions, but it's hit a wall of resistance, leaving the coalition government in a deadlock. So, what's really at stake here? Joining us to discuss this is Andrew Donaldson, a senior research associate at the Southern Africa Labour and Development Research Unit at the University of Cape Town. He's also a former Treasury official and the author of quite an important piece that went out in the conversation earlier on. And he's joining us now to participate in what is actually quite a tricky tax debate. Andrew, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Zahid, and I'm delighted to be able to join Salam Media.
Your article highlighted the finance minister's initial push to raise VAT from 15% to 17%. Now, since then, that has changed. He's scaled it back to a gradual 1 percentage point increase over 2 years. Do you think this compromise makes it a better or worse idea for South Africa right now?
Well, I think that the phased increase in VAT that is now proposed 0.5% in May and another 0.5% in April next year, I think that that's much more manageable and households will be able to adjust to those changes much more easily than a full 2 percentage points in one adjustment, which was the original budget proposal 3 weeks ago. VAT as a tax on a very wide range of goods and services. Everybody pays VAT on most of what they purchase at the supermarket every month. It's a tax system that works well. It raises revenue fairly efficiently. And it doesn't get changed very often. And so a 2 percentage point increase as proposed 3 weeks ago was really quite a big shift upwards. The last time VAT increased in 2018 was by 1 percentage point from 14% to 15%. And the only increase in the VAT rate that's been made in the past was in 1993. So in 1993, it went up from 10%, which was the rate at which it was introduced in 1991, to 14%, and it stayed 14% all the way until 2018. So it's been a stable tax, and so a bit of a shock announcement in February, and I think that the minister has been very sensible to phase in the adjustment. It's still controversial. There's still many people saying within the GNU, within the Government of National Unity, and more widely, people are saying that they don't want to see any tax increase at all. So it's not over yet. There's still a debate ongoing in Parliament, and we'll have to watch and see what happens.
Yeah, I think the initial plan, most parties rejected that across the board. But the scaled down plan, I think that's something that has been a bit divisive. We've got parties like the Democratic Alliance rejecting it, but then you have parties like the Patriotic Alliance and Good Party. Those are the two that come to mind, which have said, okay, we're not quite happy with this, but we'll work with it because we're happy with some of the other aspects of this budget. Um, when with major parties now rejecting, I mean, we're talking about the Democratic Alliance, the second largest party in this GNU, having rejected this smaller VAT hike. Where do you see the government finding the money that it needs, for
Well,
instance,
it's the VAT increase that's hit the headlines and is very much under the spotlight politically. But actually, in recent years, the personal income tax has become the largest source of revenue to government, and the effective burden on households of the personal income tax has increased over the last few years quite considerably year by year. So the personal income tax rates and brackets and the thresholds all get adjusted, or usually get adjusted every year. Last year, there were no changes to the personal income tax thresholds. And because it's a progressive schedule, so if you're earning just under 100,000 Rand a year, you don't pay any personal income tax at all. If you're earning 300,000 Rand a year, you pay a rate of about 15% on your income. And if you're earning 2 million Rand a year, then you're paying 45% at a marginal rate. So because it's a progressive schedule like that, when there's inflation, people's wages and salaries perhaps go up just because of inflation, so still earning the same in real terms, they move up into a slightly higher tax bracket. And so that's what we sometimes call the sort of stealth tax of the personal income tax. And more or less everybody's personal income tax burden has increased by about 3 percentage points over the last decade. So that happened. That's a more gradual change. If you compare that to the 2 percentage point that was proposed on the VAT increase, actually the personal income tax burden has increased by more than the VAT increase that was proposed, but over quite a long period of time. And so what's happened now is that by comparison with what was proposed in February, the minister is now giving less relief on personal income tax. So he's going to be generating another 15 billion or so from the VAT increase of 0.5 percentage point, but he's also going to generate another 18 billion or so. I'm not going to be precise about the numbers, by not adjusting the personal income tax brackets for inflation. And this is now the second year in a row that there are no adjustments to the personal income tax thresholds, no adjustments to the no relief to compensate for inflation in personal income tax. So everybody in real terms is going to be paying slightly higher in the personal income tax. So that's where most of the extra revenue is coming from to offset this VAT increase. And I can say, just as a matter of sort of historical interest, you have to go back to 1991, 92, 93, so before the change of government, to find years when the economy was in such difficulties that there were no changes made in those years in successive years for the personal income tax increases. Personal income tax relief has been pretty much a feature of the budget for every year, except last year and now this year. And you've got to go back to 1991, 92 to find a similar period where the personal income tax burden has been stepped up in this way. He's also made some changes to the spending side. So because the VAT rate increase is a bit lower, the minister is also saying, well, he can't afford to give quite as much of an increase in social grants. The old age grant and the child support grant, the disability grants are going to go up by a little bit less. They'll go up by inflation, but by a little bit less than he proposed in February. And so there's also some offsetting reduction in the spending side of the budget to offset the VAT, the lower level of increased VAT.
I mean, if we'll get to personal income tax in a moment, but if the VAT is so, or as unpopular as it's being made out to be, why is the ANC or Enoch Godongwana, as an ANC employee, so determined to go ahead with this increase? I mean, how much is this going to bring in for the government, for the Treasury, and is that enough to address the pressing issues?
So the pressing spending issues are very, very real. So you've got health services and education services, increased enrollment in schools. You've got all the many functions of government, police services, and so on, municipal services that need to be invested in. So it's the spending pressures on government that have made it necessary for tax increases to be found. And behind that problem of the budget is the problem of really the bigger problem of an economy that is not growing fast enough. So if the economy is only growing at less than 1%, less than the rate of population growth in real terms, then in order to continue to provide the services that government is responsible for, you have to find the money somewhere, and that's why we're looking at tax increases. But it's also why other parties in this debate now are saying, well, you've got to also look at the spending issues. You've got to look at what gets wasted in government spending. You've got to look at whether we really can afford the 5.5% increase in government salaries that has been agreed in the public sector bargaining chamber. There are many parts of the economy where salary adjustments are not as large as that, where businesses are struggling, small businesses that are hanging on to staff and not able to pay inflation-related adjustments. So I think that what we're going to see in the period ahead is an increased focus on the spending side. We're going to see lots more people within the parliamentary committees that are responsible for interrogating the proposals that the Treasury has made, that the Minister has made. We're going to see a much more intensive focus on the spending side of the budget. And I think that's welcome. I think everybody wants to see assurances that government is doing as much as it can to avoid waste in the spending side of the budget.
Mm. I mean, when we look at who the VAT increase will affect, I think it's going to, everyone's really going to feel the pinch, but most importantly, low income households, people who are already struggling to get by on a daily basis. The revised budget promises more zero rated food items. So that's meant to soften the blow. Do you think that's enough to protect the poorest South Africans, or is that just a small fix?
It's a little bit more relief. The thing about zero rating of the foodstuffs is that it's really hard to find things to zero rate that only benefit the poor. If you zero rate fresh vegetables, which is already zero rated to a considerable extent, everybody benefits from that. And so a large part of the tax relief goes to people who don't need it. And what's now been done is they've added a few categories of tinned vegetables, we understand, and some special categories of meat cuts that are largely consumed by low-income households, largely consumed from informal traders, and so on. And that's a bit of relief on through the VAT zero rating, but to answer your question, no. I mean, you can't solve the poverty problem through tax measures. You can't solve the poverty problems that are associated with unemployment through measures that operate through the tax system. So the social grants, the social assistance system that we have, old age grants, the child support grant, and the social relief of distress grant, which has also been budgeted for again this year, although the minister is not yet committing himself permanently to the SRD grant, which is, as you know, 370 rand a month. It's not a huge amount of money for people who have no other sources of income. So those are much more important than the tax measures in providing some cash into the hands of households to keep them going. But I think that we also have to say, we all have to recognize that you can't solve poverty problems through social grants either. Ultimately, we need an economy that creates jobs. We need to bring our unemployment rate down if we're really going to make progress, not just in ensuring households have income, have access to opportunities, but also that we invest in the improvements in living standards, better housing conditions, everything else that contributes to the quality of life and to reducing the inequality that is such a feature of our society. And so you have to ask what the budget does to stimulate investment in housing, improve municipal services, job creation, and the other things that contribute to opportunities for households. And I think that this debate about VAT in some ways is going to turn into a discussion, a debate, a political focus on growth and investment and the things that contribute to broadening the economy. Because ultimately, if government needs more resources to spend the things that government needs to do, the economy needs to be growing.
Yeah, and I think it really depends where you're coming at this from. the perspective that you're looking at this, what the budget should do, what it shouldn't do. From your perspective, though, does is the state's plate too full at the moment?
I think yes. I think the state is trying to do too many things. I think when you really dig down into the wide range of activities of government, it's not difficult to find things that perhaps the government's not very good at doing and could be better left to the private sector or to be structured in different ways. And an example that is often given of that is the funding arrangements that accompany the Skills Development Act. So we have a Skills Development Act that levies a 1% tax on all on the wages paid and salaries paid by all businesses. That goes into sector education and training authorities. They in turn reimburse businesses for training activities and put some money into encouraging better training plans across the economy. And the ideas behind that are clearly sensible. You want to encourage training, you want to encourage skills development, you want to encourage productivity improvements in the economy. But most of what, I think most economists have looked at this, say to themselves, most of what businesses are getting funded for through this SETA system, through the skills levy, are things they would do anyway. And we're also funding a large bureaucracy, 20 plus organizations that are responsible for these activities. And so that's an area where I think you need to start saying, well, is this something government really needs to do? Isn't this something that might be better left to the private sector? Mm. And there are a lot of agencies of government that have moved out of departments and into specialized units that often pay salaries that are quite a lot higher than is being paid in the rest of government. And where there might also be savings found if one really looks closely at what they're doing. But ultimately, you have to cut your cloth to the resources available, and we've certainly now for more than a decade had a very slow growing economy with governments trying to expand services. Think of the expansion of student finance and the higher education system, the expansion in health services that the Minister of Health wants to see to accompany national health insurance. All of these things need a faster growing economy if they're really to be afforded over time.
I think that sets the stage for now. It gives us a sense of what VAT is and why the government has been trying to increase it. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue with the discussion and particularly focusing on the political fallout and perhaps some of the steps that could be taken to navigate our way out of this. Please do stay with us.
Sure. Good.
Penny Appeal's Education First campaign helps children to get access to quality education.
I'm 14 years old. When I grow up, I'd like to be a scientist.
We believe every child belongs at school.
And we want education, a better education.
Learning and dreaming their way to a better future. With your help, we can provide classrooms, desks, stationery packs, and school shoes. Help make these dreams a reality. Visit www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573. Penny Appeal. Small change, big difference.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Albeit Lodge, your true home away from home. Albeit is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities, conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach and other amenities. Your stay will be truly unforgettable. as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Albeit has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albeitlodge.co.za.
Africa. This Ramadan, join Africa Muslims Agency to provide meals of mercy in 23 nations across the world. Feed the fasting for 120 Rand per day, provide a grocery hamper for 1,800 Rand per month, and feed a community for 19,000 Rand per day. A single meal can turn hunger into hope from Gaza to South Africa to Malawi and beyond. Help AMA to set a table where there was none. 23 nations, one table, every meal a mercy.
With so many investment options today, it's only natural that you might feel a little confused which route to take. Should I buy shares or should I invest in gold bullion? Randery Jewelers now brings you the Zahab coin, an alternative to the Kruger Rand. The Zahab coin, a solid wealth protector in its purest form of 24-karat gold, is the safest way to protect your wealth. So don't just sit there and watch your paper money depreciate. Change to gold. Call Randery Jewelers now at 031 202 4701 or visit www.rjcoin.co.za, situated at 151 Essenwood Road, Musgrave, Durban. Randery Jewelers, the family name you can trust.
Salam Media, your spiritual companion this Ramadan.
And we're back, coming to you live on Facebook, YouTube, X, and on the airwaves of Salam Media. If you're just joining us, we're unpacking South Africa's budget drama with Andrew Donaldson, Senior Research Associate at the SALDRU at the University of Cape Town, and a former Treasury insider. Now, before the break, we were digging into the Finance Minister's scaled-back plan to raise the VAT by 1 percentage point over 2 years. And that's a move that's still got political sparks flying, and everyday South Africans wondering what's next. Andrew's been breaking it all down for us, from the pros and the cons of this tax tweak to what it means for your wallet and the country's future. Let's jump right back in. Now, Andrew, the coalition government has been stuck in a standoff over this budget. We see the DA resisting it. They say, we will not give you that support that you require to pass this budget. And then the EFF saying, we might consider something if you have something to give us in return. How much of this mess do you think comes down to politics rather than the actual economics of raising VAT?
Sure. Well, it's a political issue for decision-making purposes. The parties are going to have to talk to each other and see if they can find a compromise. But let's talk a bit about what happens now. So 3 weeks ago, the minister had his budget ready. All the documentation was done. It had been presented to the journalists. He took it into cabinet, and although he'd kind of known this was coming, because the DA had already signaled that it was not going to be happy with a tax increase. And suddenly he was told in cabinet, no, this is not going to work. We're not going to support this. And the budget was not presented. Now it has been presented. It's a compromise proposal. It certainly involves some changes in response to the issues that the DA and other parties were raising. But it has been presented, and it's not yet been supported. So the DA and other parties in the GNU are still saying we're not happy. So what happens now? So there's a law called the Money Bills Amendment Act, which sets out the procedures that have to be followed in cabinet once a budget has been tabled. And this actually goes back to the Constitution. The Constitution has a clause in it that says Parliament must pass an act that provides the legislature, Parliament, with a procedure for amending budgets or amending what we call money bills. It's very unusual for a budget to be amended. It has not happened in all the time of our government since 1994, and it's very unusual in the budget tradition. We sometimes call it the Westminster tradition. It's basically the systems of budgeting and of financial control that come from Westminster, come from the British Parliament, go back centuries. And typically a budget gets presented by the minister, it gets accepted. There may be mutterings about various parts of it. Later in the year, there might be some changes made to it, but the government supports its budget. So this is quite an unusual position. What the Money Bills Amendment Act, which was passed in 2009 to give effect to this constitutional requirement for procedure to amend the budget, what it provides for is a sequenced set of decisions. So the first thing that happens is that the Assembly, now that the budget is presented, has to refer what's called the fiscal framework to the Finance Committee of the Assembly and the Finance Committee, the Select Committee on Finance of the National Council of Provinces. Those are the finance committees, and there are parties represented on those committees. The ANC, of course, does not have a majority in any of these committees, so it has to find agreement with other members of the committee if it's going to get the fiscal framework passed. The fiscal framework refers to the total planned spending level, the revenue proposals, the total amount of revenue to be raised, and the budget deficits that will therefore have to be financed through borrowing. So it's the big framework, it's the big picture. And these committees have got 16 days in which to prepare a report that either accepts the fiscal framework or proposes amendments to it that then go back to the Assembly. And the Assembly then says we accept or we don't the fiscal framework, or if we amend it, we want the tax level to come down or the spending level to come down. We want less borrowing or more borrowing, and there have to be specific proposals made for that. So that's the first thing that we've now got to watch for, is to what progress is made in the finance committees, who are not just sitting there and deliberating themselves. They're obliged by law to have public hearings and to listen to advice from the Financial and Fiscal Commission, the Parliamentary Budget Office, independent economists, and then to try to reach agreement on the fiscal framework. And then just to simplify the story, once the fiscal framework has been approved, so you can see how the focus is on the macro numbers to start with, then and those macro numbers include the revenue proposals and their implications for higher taxes that are needed to finance the budget. Then once the Assembly approves the fiscal framework, it goes to the Appropriations Committee, and the Appropriations Committee is the committee that has responsibility for overseeing the review of the spending plans. Spending plans of all government departments, they go to the committees, portfolio committees on agriculture, on police, and so on, will all look at the proposals and then make recommendations back to the Central Appropriations Committee. And the Appropriations Committee also has to look at what is called the Division of Revenue Bill. The Division of Revenue Bill divides up the total spending envelope between national government, provinces, and municipalities, because this national budget is also the main source of funding for provinces and quite an important source of revenue for our municipal system. And there, again, the Act sets out timelines, it sets out deadlines within which the Appropriations Committee has to hear from portfolio committees, reach an understanding, if it can, on what to recommend to the Assembly on whether to pass the Appropriation Act, Appropriation Bill and the Division of Revenue Bill, or whether to recommend amendments to them. So there's a parliamentary process through which representatives of the parties are going to have to look at the numbers in detail. And I think that it's very healthy that we're now in a situation where those committees have got that job to do. They're not just rubber stamping a budget that's approved by the minister anymore. They've actually got to grapple with the numbers and think about the options. We might get a budget that's approved. So the ultimate outcome of this committee decision making over the next 2 weeks might well be that the fiscal framework is accepted. And if the fiscal framework is accepted, then there's not very much that can change in the appropriations and the revenue proposals. Or we might get some changes proposed. And that makes our politics, it makes the role of our National Assembly and the politicians represented on those committees that much more important. I think if I can, I'm taking a long time answering this, but just to get back to the changes that have been made, to a considerable extent, it seems to me that the objections raised by the DA and others have been taken into account by the minister. I think that the politics of this is going to play. I think we're going to see progress towards a compromise understanding that will say, well, yes, maybe we can live with a 0.5% increase in the VAT and live with the rest of the tax proposals, that increase in the personal income tax burden. We can take the spending plans as proposed for now, but the Minister Godongwana, in his second budget speech, the speech that he actually delivered on Wednesday this past week, does have a strong statement of recognition that government needs to do more about the efficiency of spending. That it needs to do more to find the things that are going wrong that are causing waste. And he specifically talked about, if there are ghost workers in government who shouldn't be getting salaries, well, we'll undertake to do the work that's necessary to find that and solve those issues. So there's a strong commitment to do the expenditure reviews that the DA and other parties are calling for. And on the specifics, the truth is that the DA has not come up with a lot of very specific recommendations for what should change on the spending numbers. And it's quite hard to do that because you've got members of cabinet who are all worried about and concerned that their own responsibilities should be provided for. Nothing in the budget grows very rapidly. There are no big increases to anything, with one exception. And I'll mention this just as a last point on what's been done already, which is that in this discussion, in this debate leading up to the budget with the debate around the VAT increase, a lot of people were saying, the DA was saying, and other commentators were saying, well, shouldn't we be doing more to strengthen the revenue service, strengthen Edward Kieswetter, who's the commissioner of the Revenue Service's hand, so that he can ensure that the tax that should be paid gets paid. Kieswetter himself has gone public and by saying, if he had more resources, if he was able to spend more on IT and systems and lawyers and experts, he would be able to to claw back some of the money that people owe to the fiscus but are not paying.
Mm.
And so in the change that's made between February and the budget presented last week, another 4 billion rand was added for the next 3 years to the budget of the Revenue Service. And now we're going to have to see how successful SARS is in doing that job of strengthening revenue collection. And the minister said, if that works, if we really see the improvements in revenue performance that flow from these additional allocations of funding, then we can reconsider the 0.5 percentage point tax increase that is penciled in for next year. Sorry, that was a long answer to your question, but I wanted to sketch how it's not just a political debate at the sort of abstract level of sort of noise and speeches. There are parliamentary committees now that are having to grapple with these things and try to reach agreement. And so let's watch the space.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes this whole situation quite unusual. Whereas in the past, we would have the ANC and the committees just rubber stamping the budget. And once the minister delivered it, it would be a given that this is the budget and this is how government is going to allocate funds. But that's not the case anymore. So thank you so much for giving us an overview of that process, and it does help to understand what's really going on here. My understanding, and we haven't got much time remaining, but just quickly, my understanding of the VAT Act is that the government can go ahead with an increase, but that's for a limited period. I think it's something like a year. I might be wrong. The DA announcing that they're planning to first take a political action, but then if necessary, they would take legal action. How do you see this playing out?
Yes, so that's true of both the revenue and the spending side of the budget in different ways. So the appropriation bill, the act that authorizes government spending, actually doesn't get passed till late in the year. It usually gets passed it completes the process of going through all the committees and finally getting approved by sort of July or August or something like that. And there's enabling legislation that allows the government to spend money of up to such and such a percent of the previous year's budget, month by month, until the Appropriation Act is passed. So there's a 4-month period really during which these discussions can take place on the spending side. But on the revenue side, of course, the tax changes have to take effect. And so what the law provides for, as you rightly say, is that the VAT increase takes effect in May, as the minister proposes, just because he's announced it in a speech. And the legislation actually gets finalized later in the year when the revenue laws are considered by Parliament. It would be really complicated for the VAT increase to be implemented, and then in 6 months' time, Parliament says no, and it then has to be clawed back. Technically, that can be done. Technically, VAT increases that are then reversed through the law could be reimbursed to VAT taxpayers through the VAT system. The VAT system operates through refunds because of the way it works. You pay VAT on the sales, and you claw back VAT on your intermediate inputs on your purchases as a business. So we could end up with the tax increase being turned down and a clawback having to be administered later in the year, but that would be messy. Certainly, that's not a desirable outcome. I think the DA might challenge the legal procedures here, but I think that's very unlikely. I mean, these are standing laws, and this is in order to make the tax system work, it has to have that ability to announce a decision and get on with it. And if there are things to be resolved, that happens later in the year.
And I think that also raises questions about the credibility of the Government of National Unity as it stands at the moment. But just finally, if this has obviously generated a good deal of pushback, and there's no sign that that's going to subside anytime soon. But if you were back at the Treasury, I mean, you were at one stage in a position of Deputy Director General there at the Treasury. If you were back, how would you then advise the minister? What would you tell him to focus on to get this budget passed and actually working for South Africans?
Well, it's economic growth in the end that has to be the big priority now. I mean, and the growth of the economy last year was just 0.6%. It's, the Treasury's estimate was that it had been 0.8%. The numbers came through just a few days ago from Stats SA, 0.6%. And of course, the economy grows both by real growth, that's the 0.6% number, and also by inflation. The inflation increase was also low. It was 3.8%. So the economy grew by only 4.4% in nominal terms, in money terms. And we're paying that 5.5% increase in wages and salaries to public servants. So that's a clear sort of balance that's got to be addressed. You can't realistically carry on paying people more when the economy is only growing by less. And so I think the personnel spending decisions, the salary adjustments that are made in the budget is the really big decision point that the minister is going to have to focus on in the period ahead. And then I would say, in thinking about what has to change, even in thinking about what taxes make sense and what taxes don't, because an implied personal income tax increase such as we're going to get now because of the absence of inflation adjustments does mean less real spending power in households' hands. Less spending power in households' hands means that there's less demand going into the shops, less business activity as a consequence. And I do think at a stage now where some bold decisions are going to have to be taken. It's not just the Minister of Finance that needs to address this. It's a whole of cabinet issue, and it's something that is ultimately the responsibility of the president. We've got to find the things to do that create jobs and boost the economy. Some of that's underway. We've making progress in fixing the electricity system. There's work being done on transport logistics. But I think we all know that the business environment in townships, the opportunities for small businesses are not what they should be. And I would look for that area of spending activities, the regulatory environment, the role of municipalities in opening up opportunities in townships. I would look to those kinds of activities as the main priorities, not just for this budget, but for the next 5 years, the next 10 years.
And I think that's something that has been reiterated quite a number of times over the past few months, at least since the GNU has been instituted, where many have been saying that the credibility of this government actually does hinge on its ability to deliver, and that also a great deal tying in with its ability to grow the economy or create conditions that are conducive for that. But I think that's as much time as we've got for now. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us here on Salam Media.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, that was Andrew Donaldson speaking to us about the budget saga, something that has been in the headlines this week, especially because it concerns you and I as ordinary citizens. A VAT increase is not something that's merely an announcement by the finance minister. It's something that does, in the end of it all, affect us, and it does lead to us digging deeper into our pockets, which is quite a difficult thing to do under the current circumstances. The time right now, 4 minutes to 5 p.m. We'll take a break for the Asr Adhan. When we come back, we'll continue. Please stay with us.
Freedom Stationery supply Marlin and Marlin Kids pens to me and my school friends. They supply just about everything we need to help us get a better education, from books to files to rulers. In fact, any any accessory we need. Freedom Stationery. Education for the nation. What does accessory mean?
More than 800 million people around the world live in deep poverty, uncertain of where the next meal will come from. For those on the brink of starvation, a food pack means survival, dignity, and hope. Send food. Send kindness. Be the reason a family does not go hungry. Donate now to Islamic Relief.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic Sharia and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Valley's Motor Spares. We supply motor spares and accessories for all makes and models of motor cars, LDVs, bakkies, trucks, and earth-moving equipment. We deliver on time, every time. Please contact us via WhatsApp on 014-592-0925 or call 014-592-0925 or visit 28 Zenderling Street, Rustenburg. Remember the name, Valley's Motor Spares.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters.